Right, 12:05, perfect. Right, okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the conference today. Thanks for coming in and listening in, and hopefully we can give you some insight into the space industry, what we're doing right here in the UK, lots of very interesting things. So yeah, I work for Airbus. You've probably heard of Airbus. If you've been on holiday, flown anywhere, from the UK, you've probably been on an Airbus aircraft. So Airbus is our parent company, and there are some divisions. So they divided up inside Airbus into a couple of divisions. So there's big Airbus, and then there's two divisions. There's Airbus Helicopters and Airbus Defence and Space. And I work in the bit called Airbus Defence and Space, and I work right here in the UK. So Airbus Defence and Space is a global company with presence all over the world, but primarily in Europe and of course in the UK. And Airbus Defence and Space is a $10 billion revenue company. So it's quite big numbers. There's lots going on. There's lots of customers. There's lots of exciting things we're doing. And a lot of that work is actually done right here in the UK. So in terms of the UK landscape for Airbus, there's lots of Airbus people in the UK building the wings for aircraft and landing gear for aircraft. But with Defence and Space, where I work, mainly clustered around three physical sites in the UK. So that's Stevenage in Hertfordshire, just north of London, Portsmouth, where I work on the south coast, and Newport, just over the Severn Bridge into Wales. And broadly split a third in terms of numbers of people, so around about 1,000 people on those sites, slightly more in Stevenage. Stevenage is a slightly bigger site, about 1,200 people in Stevenage. And now, you know, this is you've probably heard of Airbus, you've probably heard of Airbus Defence and Space, you've certainly heard of some things that we've been doing in the company. Now, I was listening to the previous speaker about Earth observation. So we do work in Earth observation. We build, and for the 7% of you that tick this, we want to build satellites box, again, you're going to be very happy that in Airbus Defence and Space in the UK, we mainly build satellites, but also we build Mars rovers. And also in the Newport site, it's not quite so space centric. It's actually cyber security is what we do in Newport. So it's not all about space in Airbus Defence and Space. There's that defence element as well, which we do things with military aircraft, and that cyber security element in Newport. Now, if you're a space nerd like me, you might not surprise that I'm a space nerd. If you're a space nerd like me, you might be following along with events that are happening in space in the last few years. You might have heard in 2020 a spacecraft launch called Solar Orbiter. So Solar Orbiter is a satellite that was launched to go and look at the sun and study the sun. It's the closest camera that there is to the sun. Solar Orbiter was designed, built, and put together, tested all up in the Stevenage site. And I was up in Stevenage recently and had a quick look into the clean room when I could see a really big, tall satellite, wedge-shaped satellite, and it's called Biomass. And Biomass is due to launch in 2024. And Biomass is really, really cool. It's more Earth observation. It's got a P-band synthetic aperture radar. Okay, so it's got a radar that can shoot down from space, and it can penetrate through clouds. And the P-band is particularly sensitive to organic matter. So what Biomass is going to do, it's going to measure the mass of all the biological material on the planet. So it's going to be looking at how much tree material, how much plant material there is going to be on the surface, and they can monitor that for 5 years while it's up in orbit. Probably will last a little bit longer, but for that 5 years of its mission, it's going to be looking at the mass of the biome on the planet and looking for changes and looking for trends in that. So that's built up in Stevenage. And my particular passion, Mars rovers, you might have heard of Rosalind Franklin, the ExoMars rover. It's a bit of a sad story at the moment, but actually the rover, Rosalind Franklin, was designed, built and tested by teams of people up in Stevenage. And up in Stevenage, we have a big Mars yard, a big room full of sand and rocks that's just like the surface of Mars for testing Mars rovers. You might have seen Bruno, pictures of Bruno on the Mars yard, or Bruno going out and around to events around the UK. Now, Rosalind Franklin, the ExoMars rover, was due to launch this year on a rocket to head towards Mars, and the rover was to be put onto the surface on a landing platform. So the rover didn't land itself on the surface, it actually had a landing platform that it drove off. The launcher, the rocket to take it to space, and the landing platform were coming from Russia, and the European Space Agency quite rightly decided they didn't want to work with Russia anymore at the great risk of its own program. So we've got this rover. It's been designed, built, tested, assembled, put together, and ready to fly in space, and now it's not flying in space. And just recently, ESA have announced some funding for the development of a new landing platform. which is really, really good news. They've committed that money, and we'll be bidding on that project to develop a landing platform for the rover that we developed in Stevenage. So there's lots of very exciting things coming up for us. And in the Portsmouth site where I work most often, we have a big clean room for doing the assembly of telecommunications satellites. So I've done a few things on Earth observation. So telecommunication satellites, really, really big satellites. We're talking things over a ton, so like shooting a great white shark into space. Doesn't sound like very much, but actually, when you think about launching that up into space, that's quite a weight. Telecommunication satellites, so things like, for example, the Sky TV satellites. So when you look at houses out and about as you're walking around, going about your day, have a look at some houses around you. You'll see any dishes they've got on the side of their houses are all pointing in the same direction. So you can actually, if you're lost, you can work out what direction you are facing in by looking at the sky dishes on people's houses. They sort of head in a southeasterly direction, and they're pointing out into space to a constellation of satellites called Astra, which are used to broadcast the Sky TV signal from space. They're out in geostationary orbit. Very, very clever orbit. So Earth observation satellites are in a low Earth orbit, so say 200, 300, 400 miles above the surface, and they're whizzing around the Earth, taking pictures all the time. Geostationary orbit is much further out into space, where one orbit of the satellite takes 1 day. And the clever thing with that is that the satellite, although it is orbiting the Earth, it is going around the Earth once a day, the Earth is rotating below it. And that has the effect of essentially the satellite is staying in the same spot in space, which is why the dishes on your houses don't have to track a satellite in space. They just point out into space and scoop up those signals. And also, I've just mentioned, it was just mentioned by the previous speaker about Earth observation satellites, and he mentioned Sentinel. So Sentinel-5 of the Copernicus constellation of satellites was built by Airbus and in the UK. And most of the Sentinel satellites had some element of Airbus Defence and Space in them, either building the whole satellite or building an instrument on the satellite. So lots of things going on. So Airbus Defence and Space is the biggest space company in Europe, and we get a lot of work from the European Space Agency, and a lot of that work we get from the European Space Agency comes here to the UK. So people say to me quite often about the money we're giving to the European Space Agency. You know, why do we give all this money? We give million pounds of our money to the European Space Agency every year. Why do we do that? Well, we do that to be a member of the European Space Agency, and being a member of the European Space Agency isn't linked to Brexit, so we can still be part of the European Space Agency. But most of that money that we give as a nation, the UK, actually comes back to UK companies working in space as contracts and work that we do. So that money just comes straight back around and goes into the pay packets of people like me. Now, people like me, I'm sitting in front of you, I'm clearly a nerd. I'm sitting in my workshop at home. This is my workshop/home office, where I build things. I'm an engineer, right? I've always been an engineer all my life. It took me till about maybe my mid-teens to realize that engineering was something I wanted to do. And I really enjoyed it. I was fascinated with building things, taking things apart, exploring how things worked, always swimming in Lego as a kid, and actually building Lego. It's a child's toy, yes, but actually it's a really great introduction to training your brain to be an engineer and how things work, how things go together, how machines can interact, building up that spatial awareness in your head. So if you're still building Lego in your teens, don't worry about it. I was, and I still am, and I still love getting Lego. And actually, I'll probably be getting some Lego for Christmas from my family. So, you know, I'm a real nerd. Now, I'm an engineer. I'm an electrical engineer, electronics engineer. Right now, my job is more looking at the needs of the company in the future, making sure we've got the engineers that we need, which is probably why I'm talking to you today, because you are engineers of the future. But for the last 20 years, I've been working in electronics. So my job as an electronics engineer, I've designed ground stations. So I went out to Abu Dhabi, spent 6 months in the UAE, designing the infrastructure for a ground station. Now, it's not in space, but actually it's very important for a satellite to have a ground station so it can receive the signals, transmit signals to a satellite, and also control the satellite in its orbit. So I did the infrastructure on the ground, so all of the networks, all the cables, everything in the ground station to enable that to happen. And I was very lucky to be in Abu Dhabi working in the ground station when the first of the satellites was launched. So we were able to point our dishes at the satellite and track it straight away from in the desert just outside of Abu Dhabi, which is very exciting. That was my first introduction to the space industry. Was, you know, going down the road, watching a satellite launching on TV, then racing out into the desert to our ground station and seeing if we could track it with our equipment. It was very exciting. And then I came back to the UK and did some work in satellite communications for ships. So Royal Navy warships, they have on them, the big ones, that is, they have on their masts 2 dishes under domes. And if you ever get to see a warship, have a look for domes on the side, big domes, because under those are dishes pointing out into space. And they will be pointing towards a satellite out in space to give that ship communications. Now, the UK warships, they have a system on board that talks to a big satellite out in space called Skynet. So if you've ever seen the films Terminator, you've heard the word Skynet. Now, Skynet is a satellite to us. Skynet is a satellite, not a sentient machine. So Skynet is a really big, really powerful satellite sitting out in space. In fact, it's a constellation. There's more than one. And those ships are out at sea in all weathers, pointing their dishes at those satellites in space, maintaining that communication so they can go and do their job out there in space. So designing the electrical systems for these dishes, pointing these dishes has been very exciting and very difficult. And a lot of the work we do is in not just designing something, but actually working with the team of people who build it, and then testing that thing before we give it to our customer. So, for instance, the dishes on the Royal Navy warships, those dishes have to track a satellite in space while the ship is moving around on the sea. So as it's just driving around on the sea, that dish has to keep pointing towards that satellite up in space. So it's a geostationary satellite. It's not moving, but the ship is moving. So that dish now needs to be able to track. But also that dish needs to be able to track that satellite out in space when that ship is in the worst of weather. So sea state 6. So someone said to me, you've got this system that can track a satellite out in space when the ship is moving around at sea state 6. It's a bit like moving your head around, but your eyes keep pointing in the same direction. Wildly moving your eyes around, but keeping your eyes pointing. This system would keep working even before the Royal Navy decided to go home. So it's there, and it's critical that communications is maintained even in the worst of weathers, right? Because what they don't want to be doing is saying, we want to put a call for help and we can't because our system isn't working. So building those systems and testing them, challenging them, and making sure they work when they get given to our customers is a really big part of what I do. And then I moved on to working on Zephyr. So if you've ever heard of Zephyr, it's a solar powered uncrewed vehicle, flies at 70,000 feet, 25-meter wingspan, climbs up into the stratosphere, so 70,000 feet, twice as high as a jumbo jet, charges its batteries during the day using the sun, and then flies overnight, staying above 70,000 feet, using electric motors and propellers, using the power from the batteries. Now, it's sounds very simple, but it's very hard to do. To stay that high overnight using batteries is very hard. So very lightweight aircraft. And the controllers, like I said, are on the ground. There's a ground control station with 2 pilots and a mission planner, and they're flying that vehicle, that airplane remotely, and it's often beyond line of sight, so they cannot see it where they are, either with their eyes or with radio waves. So it's over the horizon, and it has to be flown using data over satellites. So the pilots aren't flying it with sticks, like you would imagine a radio control airplane. They actually give the Zephyr aircraft waypoints, and it follows those waypoints, and they're just leaving a crumb trail in the sky for this airplane to follow. And the thing with that is that a satellite, an Earth observation satellite whizzing around the Earth, you might have even seen one at night. If you go out and look in the evenings now, you can pretty much guarantee see a satellite. If it's heading north to south, it's probably an Earth observation satellite. It's in a polar orbit, so it's going around the poles. That's got a camera on it looking down at the Earth, and you can imagine if you were waving, that could take a picture of you as it's going overhead and see you there. But when it's on the other side of the Earth, it can't see you. So Earth observation satellites are really good at taking images of the Earth and having sensors on them to map atmosphere or map sea levels, but they can only map the bit that they're flying over at that time. Now, what we're doing with this Zephyr aircraft is it's called a high altitude pseudo satellite. So it can behave and operate like a satellite, but it's not a satellite. So we can put almost the same instrumentation on the aircraft as you would on a satellite. And you can fly that over anywhere, and you can leave it there, because essentially if it's in the sky at 70,000 feet, flying on a racetrack shape in the sky like that, it's essentially still in the sky. And that payload, that radar or camera that you've got on that aircraft looking down, stays over the site. So if you're underneath it looking up and waving, it's still there. So that's actually a very critical part of Earth observation, because if you're looking for a very specific thing, you might have to wait for your satellite to overfly the site you want to take an image of, and it might not be there when you want it to be. With a high altitude pseudo satellite, this aircraft, you can fly anywhere in the globe essentially, and leave it hanging over that site. So imagine a disaster zone, an island in the middle of nowhere, which has a tsunami has wiped it out. There's no communications infrastructure. We can put a cellular mobile phone base station on this aircraft, and maybe a satellite communication link back for its main communications. And essentially, that aeroplane flying above that island would give that island, then the mobile phones would start working, or maybe radios. What you can do with this aircraft is you can put a small transponder on it, a transceiver, sorry, and it will take radio handheld walkie-talkies that normally work quite, within a couple of kilometers, and you can make them work within 50, 60 kilometers, because you're bouncing the signals off of an aircraft rather than trying to get it directly across the ground. So there's lots and lots of capability for the Zephyr solar-powered aircraft. So really exciting things happening in Airbus Defence and Space right now, and lots of opportunities. So in terms of careers, I'm an ex-apprentice, so I did an apprenticeship. And I'm a big advocate for apprenticeships. And right now, as you're coming towards sort of the last part of your school journey, and you hopefully are STEM-related students, you've been studying STEM subjects, because STEM is very important to our entry points. So right now, if you've listened to what I've said and you forget everything, just remember one thing: if you're interested in a career, Airbus Defence and Space, everything is on our website at airbus.com/careers. Now, all of our jobs go through Airbus, our parent, but you can actually drill down very simply into Airbus Defence and Space, and even you can drill down into the career type you want. So with just a few clicks on the website, you can go and find the apprenticeship schemes we've got right now open for applications. And Airbus right now has 51 apprenticeships open right now, and Defence and Space has 18. So those 18 apprenticeships that we have open right now are a varied mix of technician apprenticeships like I did, or degree apprenticeships. And you can see right there on that page the entry requirements, what we're asking for you to have to join these apprenticeship schemes. There's qualifications on there, very, very obvious there's qualifications on there, but there are some other things on there as well. We want to know about you. So your CV, great, tell us you've got the qualifications we need, but what else is there about you? What else are you doing? And if you think that having the qualifications is going to be enough, you're wrong. We need to know more about you. You need to be doing other things. And what other interests have you got? And we ask for a cover letter. Very, very difficult to write a cover letter, but try and put yourself in our place. Why do we want to choose you? What are the things about you that you think are awesome that you want to tell us? Pile them all into your cover letter, and then we can really get an idea of who you are. Because as you can imagine, we put the qualifications, so for a technician apprenticeship, it's GCSEs, grade C and above in maths, English and science and something else. And for a degree apprenticeships, it's the same. It's maths, English and science GCSEs plus A levels in something to do with STEM. So maths, further maths, those kind of things. It's all on the website. You can see it for yourself. But those things, everybody who applies generally has got those things. So how do you differentiate yourself from all the other candidates? What the other things you've been doing? And if the answer to that today is nothing, then get yourself out there and start doing some things. Look for a STEM club, look for an after-school club doing things, or just go and help out somewhere. Get some lifetime experience of doing things. If there's no STEM club near you or in your school, start one. There's lots of guidance out there on the internet about starting a STEM club. If you come to us for a job and you say, I started a STEM club, that's a massive tick. Because that shows that you're able to organize yourself, see a gap in the market, and go and rather than saying there's no STEM club because I didn't do STEM stuff, I started a STEM club. That's a really powerful thing. And remember, if you're coming to do an apprenticeship interview, you're going to have people like me sitting across the table. So we get in on these things and we interview ourselves. You need to talk to someone like me about all the things you do and how you're awesome, the things you've been building, the things you've been making, and your aspirations. But don't forget to do a little bit of research into the company you're applying to, because that shows as well. If you understand the things we're doing, the direction we're going in, the things that we're making in Airbus Defence and Space, that will show out in an interview as well. So you might be thinking more about going to university and then joining as a graduate. Well, that's equally on the website now. So we're expecting people to join as a graduate in some kind of engineering and scientific topic, but we also take graduates in project management and finance as well. So all those vacancies are on the website. And a graduate scheme is something you would join after you've been to university and got your degree, and we would take you and give you some guidance and some support around your career. It's called Early Careers, and this is a kind of way of boosting you, bringing in some talented people and boosting your career with some support, and guidance that we have within the company. Now that support and guidance is there for everyone. So we have 10,000 training courses available internally to our people. We encourage learning to be happening all the time. We're sometimes a bit challenged about making the time for learning to happen because we're so committed to our things we're building for our customers. But actually learning is something that you should be doing continuously in your job. So don't think just because you've got a job in our defense space, that's it, you've finished your learning. No, we want you to learn more. We want you to create more opportunities in your brain. And also, we're not looking for perfect candidates. We're looking for the right people with the right mindset. And if you come to us with maybe something you want to learn more on, then just say, because that's actually something we could say, look, there's a gap, they want to learn more. We can then look at whether we've got the training in place for that as well. So lots of opportunities. And as I said before, if you want to know more about Airbus Defence and Space, go and look on the website. And if you want to look about careers, go and look on the airbus.com/careers website. With a few clicks and a few filters, you can see exactly what it is you want to do. If you're not applying today, look at it today, because it will give you an idea what you're going to need in the future when you are applying, and you can work towards that right now. So hopefully that's given you some advice and some help about careers in Airbus. But like I say, it's all out there on the web. Go and do some research, and that will really show you as a good candidate if you come across to us.
That's fantastic, John.